Mr. Abdulrahman, I've just got to have to interrupt you there. We've got some sound problems with the live link from Bahrain this evening. We're going to try and sort those out. We will come back to you, I can assure you. Nazanin, you've got some interesting views, haven't you, on this possible Iranian involvement or not, as the case may be?
Obviously, Mr. Abdulrahman is correct in the sense that since the 1979 revolution, one of the hallmarks and the cornerstones of the Islamic Revolution was the export of its revolution abroad, the Islamic Revolution, through the region and across the world. And it seems in the 1981, Mr. Abdulrahman mentioned, yes, at the moment, however, it seems, I mean, number one, the report itself says that they haven't found any involvement of the Iranian government in the protest. That doesn't mean that through their media and they were not encouraging it. Why wouldn't they encourage it? Because you put yourself in their shoes. They're sitting in Tehran with all these disturbances around them and being so scared. Obviously, they would like to create more fire elsewhere.
It was a pretty exhaustive report, this, but do you
Yes.
think this was the one part of the report that could have had more detail?
Yes, because obviously the report says that they didn't have access to all the available information. But let me say something else. The Zobbi poll that had been done in, for example, for the past 4 years, Iran had always been at the a model for the Arab street. But in the past 2 years, the Arab street is no longer looking at Iran. And specifically, it could be because of the 2009 green movement that started there and the way they saw that the Iranian government is actually treating its own people. Now, another point to remember is that I think as far as the internal situation in Iran is concerned, the government in Tehran is involved in so many crises, decision-making crisis at home amongst themselves. Only 2 days ago, Mr. Ahmadinejad's press spokesman was arrested, but also it is involved with Hezbollah, it is involved with Hamas, it is involved in Afghanistan, it is involved in Iraq, and it does not have the capacity to be able to direct another revolution at the moment.
But it may not have the capacity, but possibly the interest.
Of course, it will always have the interest because it is a regime that thrives through chaos. But I think what we need to realize is that, you know, Shiism, I mean, it is very easy to say Sunni Shia divide, but within I think there's a complete misunderstanding of what Shiism is all about. Shiism doesn't have one center of power.
Well, I think we'll come on to this in a moment because it's a big topic.
Yes.
A lot of the international community are calling Bahrain a divided country for that very reason. I'd love to get your thoughts on that in just a moment. But let's just cross to New York and get the thoughts of Mansour al-Jamri on the possible involvement of Iran, although this report clearly says there were none.
Because I'm a Bahraini, because I lived in Bahrain, because I know what's going on in the opposition. I used to be the spokesperson of the opposition 10 years ago. I know Bahrain is not, Iran is not involved and will not be involved. And if it is involved, we will not allow it. We have people with demands. We have very legitimate demands. We're the people of Bahrain, and I don't think anybody with the correct set of mind will think that the people of Bahrain or half of the people or whatever belongs to Iran. If they say that, then they are a dangerous, slippery road. They cannot approve it. They have not approved it to the world, entire United States, the UK, the Europeans, all the intelligence agencies of the world, and Basuni didn't find it. So let's cross over. And I'm sure there will be maybe even in India that people think that the Indian Raj or the British Raj is still controlling them. There are people who still live in the past. And we live now in the present. The present is there is an Arab Spring. The present is there is a Basuni report. And beyond that, we need to see that what happened in our country must be now remedied and redressed. We had people with selfish interest who found the events very good for them to establish an apartheid system, whereby that a section of the Bahrain community now has been cleansed out of the public life. We need to reintegrate everybody. Anybody who is a Bahraini citizen is entitled for his full rights and full stop. That's where it is. If there is a problem in Iran, well, we hope for the Iranians to solve their problems. We hope for the Indians, we hope for the Pakistanis, we hope for anybody in the world to get democracy. And what we need is democracy, and we're going to get it.
So before we move on, you don't believe there should be any further investigation into this?
I investigate. They didn't find anything because there is nothing. There is an Iranian TV that propagates something against the government of Bahrain, and there is also channels. There is a Saudi TV that propagates against the Shia people, and there are lots of other TVs that have propagated. So if you were to say that because there is a TV channel found there is its own selfish interest to propagate something, then I would say those who also oppose the reform movement belong to Saudi Arabia or belong to foreign powers, Al-Qaeda. I mean, I don't want to say that because this is really a scaremongering, and we're not in a scaremongering. We have a very rational report. I might not agree with it for 100%, but I will take it now 100%. Because the king has adopted it, I adopt it, and let's move on.
Okay, Nazanin, we briefly touched on it. I've certainly seen in recent months newspaper headlines in papers in Britain and America calling Bahrain a divided nation because of the protests on the street. Do you think they've got the message wrong, the international press? Do you think there's another reason? Is there a divide there?
Well, the way I see the international press, for example, deal with this issue of ethnicity in Iran or different religions in Iran or elsewhere, it is very easy to put things in boxes. It is easier to analyze when there are boxes and simplify them. But I think at the end of the day, there is more that unites people of Bahrain together as part of one nation that divides them because of their beliefs. I mean, at the end of the day, what a person's religion is, if Bahrain is a signatory to the Universal Declaration of human rights is above religious divide. And at the end of the day, I don't think that, when you talk about Shiism, for example, you really understand what Shiism is about. Shiism, there's no one center for Shiism. There's no one center in Qom or either in Najaf with Mr. Sistani. There are sources of emulation in Shiism and a lot of these sources of emulations, for example, in Iran, are in prison at the moment. We've got most of the prisoners in Iran being of Shia descent or dervishes. So I don't think it's a very dangerous route to go down this of trying to divide people based on their religion or ethnicity. At the end of the day, we are all human beings. And at the end of the day, that there has to be a uniform application of law and reason.
Let's try and go back to Bahrain. Anwar Abdul Rahman is there for us this evening. I'm sure you've been listening to what our other guests have been saying on this issue. But do you believe that there is any tension between the Sunnis and Shias in Bahrain, or is this something that has come out of international press getting the wrong end of the story?
Well, I think I will be very fair. Of course, there are misunderstandings. There are two sects today in Bahrain, and this is a fact, and in the last 8 months also it has proved more. Whole uprising which took in Bahrain, and that the Shias were the beginners, and they talked, including Dr. Al-Jamri himself as well, talking about constitutional monarchy and so on. And more than that, and they at the level of constitutional monarchy to the level of Westminster, which we are all for it. But let's wait a minute and talk correctly. The constitutional monarchy in Britain is controlled by the Constitution and the member of the parliaments, and not by the Archbishop of Canterbury. But what these people that made up, they want constitutional monarchy controlled by Ayatollah of the time. Now, how can politics? They want a carbon copy of, which is like Iran. They are democratic, so they say. But is that democratic? Of course not. Because when the supreme leader of religion controls even the power of the president of a nation, is democracy. What happened in Bahrain in the last 8 months or 9 before that, they have given to the world a wrong image, a wrong impression. Are democracy seekers. They don't believe at all. They believe in theology because they take their orders from the commander of the faithful of the religion.
Mansour Al-Jamri in New York,
from the
are
members
you
of
in
the
agreement
parliament.
with Mr. Abdul Rahman?
I really just focus on your question, which is, are there divides? At the moment, there had been differences of opinion between the communities, but I think they were propagated by a certain group because they thought the Sunnis can be agitated against the Shia so that they become like a human shield against any possible change. This was a mistake, a strategic error that has caused many pains for many people. I don't believe there are any differences between the Shias and Sunnis. There are differences between interest groups. And I think those interest groups will find another reason. I think tomorrow, if they need to do the same thing to the Sunni people, exactly what happened to the Shia people, as has been described by the Bassiouni report, they will do it, and they will say that the Sunni people belong to Al-Qaeda and the Sunni people belong to foreign powers. I think let me just clear this issue. We are all human beings. We are all entitled to express ourselves freely and peacefully. And I think the vast majority of Bahrainis share the same principles. They want to have a dignified life, and they want to live in the 21st century with a modern constitution that respects the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now that we have the Bassiouni report, now that we have the King vow that he is going to implement the recommendations, I think this is a good opportunity to forget about all those fictitious scenarios that were created that cannot be verified, that could not be verified, that will not be verified, because they don't exist. There are lots of noises, but we're not the only country to suffer from noises. There are, on the ground, in reality, people will need each other. If anybody thinks that they can recreate South African system with an apartheid, they are mistaken. They will kill themselves first before killing the others. And this is a message not only to those people who are talking against the Shia and trying to blame them and link them to Iran. It is to the Shia people who would think they live in a separate country. We live in a Bahrain, a very small country. We have Shias and Sunnis, we have non-Muslims, we have the Hindu community which has been with us for a very long time, a highly respected community. We have the Jews, we have Baha'i, we have Shia of Persian origin, we have Sunni of Persian origin, we have all sorts of people. We were a cosmopolitan society, very proud cosmopolitan society. We should just stick to it and abide by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and move on towards reforming our situation without having to blame the outside world. Let Iran say whatever it likes. It has its own problems. The Iranian people will one day prevail with democracy, will one day get rid of dictatorship. So what? Nothing to do with us. I hope that democracy will go to everywhere in the Gulf region, to everywhere around the world.
Thank you. Well, it's quite clear His Majesty, by accepting this and publishing the report, is obviously wishing to start reforms in Bahrain. Let's now talk about that, because that's an important issue. Nazanin, there's obviously lots to talk about in terms of this, but where does a government start in reforming a country?
Well, first it has,